First, my name is Greg Rafinsky. I am a technical engineer and support engineer with OpenE. And welcome everybody to the webinar. Today, we're going to show you how to expand the iSCSI logical volumes that are involved with replication and auto failover. With the latest release of DSS v6, there's been a small change in the way that this works. In previous releases, you had to stop the failover service to expand the volumes, and that would in turn bring down the virtual IPs, and you had to disconnect all your initiators, and it was quite cumbersome for some folks. So the big change now is that you do not have to stop it. However, you will notice as we go through this, we will need to disconnect initiators that are connected to the volume that we need to expand, as well as remove its replication tasks so that we can expand the volume on both nodes. As you can see here on the screen, the steps that we're going to go through here: remove the volume replication tasks from the auto failover configuration, stop and remove the volume replication task, disable the replication feature on the logical volume that we need to expand on each node, expand the volumes to the new size, re-enable the replication feature, recreate the task and start the task, and then add it back to the failover configuration. The process is fairly straightforward, and if there aren't any questions up front, we'll go ahead and get started with it. All right, as you can see, I've got two DSS nodes in failover. We're looking at the primary here and secondary on this extra screen here. Now, in the failover configuration, as you've set this up, many of you will recall, there is the process of adding the tasks to the failover from the left side to the right side to make sure that we are involving those volumes in failover. In order to expand the volume, we need to remove the task from the failover configuration so that the system will prevent us from enlarging it if it's part of the configuration. This is the change in the new build, is to give you the ability to move it to the left, apply it, and that takes that volume out of the configuration for failover. As I mentioned before, in the past, we had to actually stop the entire service to do this, which we don't have to now. Once this is removed here, we can actually go over to volume replication and now stop that task. And as we get to the end of this, I'll explain it a little bit later, but to add it back, the volumes must be consistent as well. So we're going to stop the third replication task here and actually delete it. All right. Pardon me. Now we can actually disable the replication on these volumes. It will let us do that now. And just as you modify any volume, you use the drop down, modify the volume name you want, and we need to turn the replication feature off for this particular volume. As you can see right now, with it on, we can't expand the volume just yet. And prior to doing any of this, you would disconnect any software initiators that are connected to this volume. The other two volumes that I have here on my machine can keep working. Interesting. Somehow it logged me out. Okay, so the replication's been disabled. We also need to disable the replication on, pardon me, the same volume on the secondary node. All right, back to the primary node. Now we can expand the size of this volume. I'm working with very small volumes here, so I'm just going to increase it a very small amount. I'll add 5 gigs to it. And we want to increase the volume on the secondary node exactly the same way. And back to the primary node here. Now, after they've been expanded, and depending upon how much you expand it, it may take a few seconds, it may take a couple of minutes. But you need to add back also the volume replication feature on both nodes as well. As you can see, we've got went from 10 gigs to 15 gigs, turned replication back on. Same thing on primary node, went from 10 gigs to 15 gigs and re-enabled replication. Now you can recreate the replication task at this point. For some reason it's not seeing the 1 second here. May need to add more space. Since I have such small volumes, it's not recognizing the change apparently. I know usually it's around 2 gigs that it gets a little odd in respects to that, but maybe I need to go bigger than 5 gigs. Yeah, let me increase them a little bit larger. I know typically you guys will be going, in terabyte sizes here, so. And we have to untick the volume replication here because the metadata that goes along with the volume needs to be recreated in order to recreate the task. During this process here, the entire volume will need to re-replicate at the end before you can add it back to the failover configuration. Does that help, Matt? And we're going to talk about that a little bit more at the end, but if you have email alerts set up on your system, the system will send you an email when replication is consistent again, so that you can come back into the primary node and re-add the task to the failover configuration. In my examples here, I'm using very small volumes, so the replication reaching consistency is, just only 4 or 5 minutes. If you are expanding your volume from, 2 terabytes to 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 terabytes, it might be an hour before it reaches consistency, depending upon the replication length. If you're going from 10 terabytes to 16 terabytes, for example, it might take all night, depending upon the speed of the link. So that's why the email alerts are important, because like I said, it'll let you know that consistency is reached, so you don't forget to come back and add it back to the configuration. If you try to add the task back to configuration prior to it reaching consistency, you'll get an error. The system won't let you do that. Okay, so now we're at 20 gigs. Let's see if that's a noticeable difference for the system here. Let's see. Turn the replication back on again. All right, so we can just recreate the same task. Naming convention is, entirely up to you here. The bandwidth on this task, and some of you may remember from previous webinars or discussions with us that this bandwidth limitation is for initial synchronization, and it will affect the task we're creating right now because this entire volume needs to re-replicate to the destination. Once this replication has reached consistency, then the replication speed will run as fast as the wire can take it. That helps with things staying synchronous as I/O goes on the primary. So I'm going to bring this up a little bit here to hopefully we can get this thing completely consistent before we get to the end, and I can show you to add it back again. So recreate the task and restart the task. Okay, so now that it's started, we can go to our status and actually see how long it's going to take. And as I mentioned before, if you increase the volume considerably, which is typically what would happen here, it may be anywhere from a few minutes to several hours to all night. Fortunately, in my case, we've only got, around 4.5 minutes here to reach consistency. The next step at this point is to actually go back over to the failover configuration and re-add that task from the left-hand pane to the right-hand pane, so it's part of the configuration again. If I add it now, I'll show you what I mean here. Since it hasn't reached consistency yet, you'll get an error message telling you that the task is not running or it's disconnected. It's because it's checking for consistency status at the same time, so it'll prevent you from doing this. There's what I'm talking about there. This will be changed to reflect it's not reached a consistent level as opposed to actually not running. We know it for a fact it is running. So once that does reach consistency, however, you can add it successfully. You can, at this point, however, start to reconnect initiators to that volume and provision the new space if you'd like. That won't affect the replication or the failover. Now, bear in mind that prior to adding this task back to the failover configuration, if there is a failover event, this volume will not fail over. So you need to make sure that you remember to come back and add this back to the configuration. And again, that's where the email setup will help a lot. So we've got a few minutes here. If you want to wait, we can, or if anybody has any questions, now's the perfect time to ask. Or not. Yeah, the process is fairly simple. We've done this in the past, just not involving the failover functionality. And like I said, with the new release, you can do this now kind of on the fly, so to speak, depending upon how you add more space to your storage. If you have free space in the system and you just simply need to enlarge the volume, this is a rather quick way to do it. If you need to add more hard drives or actually increase the size of the RAID array with RAID migration, then you probably would need a reboot in here at some point. So it's a little bit, few more steps at that level, but only not too complicated either. And it looks like we're maybe 1.5 minutes or so here. And once this is completed as well, this will also be on our webcast page on our website, so you guys can come back and look at it at any time. I think we've addressed this through the support channel a number of times with several people. And yes, this is functionality that is in the latest version of DSS version 6. If you have a version prior to the latest release, which is build 6156, it's advisable to make the update There are several changes in the latest release, and if you're at a point where you cannot make the update, you can ask through your support portal. We do have small updates for previous versions that will add this same functionality. So it is possible, if you can't schedule downtime, to update everything, to at least get the small update, so you have this ability. All right, now it's added back to the failover configuration. Volumes are consistent. So now everything works back the way that it was. If there's a failover event, all 3 volumes will fail over, and replication is running synchronously, so data is consistent between both nodes. If there aren't any more questions, then that's as easy as it gets for increasing the volumes.